Bring us together for this afternoon session. And so I'll call this meeting to order. I'll check to see if we have anybody here to speak, anybody for public testimony. I'm getting the word that we do not. We do not have anybody for public testimony, so we will dive right in and have our discussion, our long-awaited discussion on interim goals and interim guardrails. And so I will hand it over to Dr. Baker,
Yes.
who will lead us into that discussion.
All right, thank you. It's easy to see some of you and not to see others, so I will do my best to talk to us as we engage in a working session this afternoon. And I'm really excited and actually bringing in some nervous energy to the conversation because of the really, really good work that has been going on with the implementation timeline team, with our staff, that is reflective of the expectations that you have set through the board's goals and guardrails. So I'm going to do just a setting the context for today, and then we have several of us who will participate in facilitating the session, and we will shortly be working together in the small groups in the way that you're seated. So tonight, or this afternoon, actually is the first of two sessions that we expect between today and June 18th will result in the adoption of goals and guardrails with annual targets through 2028. Also, that will include the adoption of a monitoring calendar reflective of the board's goals and guardrails through 2028. And will introduce publicly and confirm the staff's interim goals and guardrails, which will be part of our discussion this afternoon. So while the board has been doing its board work and thinking about all of the governance that it wants to prepare for, and has been building their effective practices and working on bylaws and working at the implementation timeline, staff too has been really, really hard at work. And so as I said, we're excited to share some of the work that has been going on behind the scenes. And so some of those things that I want to bring context to are work aligning the interims to the board's goals and guardrails. We're going to use the workshop opportunity to have you look at those interims, and with a lens of looking, are they predictive? Do you see how they're predictive? Can you see some correlation to the interims to achieving the goals? And are they aspects of goals that we have, staff and I have at least 80% authority over? And that language comes directly out of the board's self-assessment tool. The other is that we are in the process of redefining what a monitoring report means. So tonight you will receive a monitoring report from Dr. Madrigal and from Mr. Moskovitz. It will be the last of its kind as we transition to how student outcome focused governance actually describes an effective monitoring report. That report in the future will include the goals, clear data in a simplified format. It includes an opportunity for interpretation rather than just coming with fresh data and not having had the opportunity to interpret. It also allows staff to provide evidence and talk about action plan that comes from that data source. So a different kind of monitoring report with those four areas in mind. The other thing is we have spent considerable time as a staff eliminating our superintendent and district goals. Not that we don't care about those goals. However, we have seen that once the board has its goals and guardrails, we have an opportunity to focus, to bring coherence to those goals, to really bring precision, so that our staff in the field, from this boardroom to every classroom, understands the task before us, can have ownership of their role in helping us to achieve those goals, and that there's a clear cascade from this boardroom to classrooms and also from classrooms to this boardroom, because we know that the magic of education happens in our classrooms, and everything that we can do as a team to focus, as you are doing on the board's goals, to support staff in reaching those goals is important to the system. Lastly, in terms of context, what you have set out to achieve as the board's goals that we are aligning to. There are other aspects of accountability that we've taken into mind. So we have the LCAP, which is also on the agenda tonight, and gives you an opportunity to see how the board's goals and guardrails are embedded into an LCAP and budgeted for. It also gives you a perspective on other goals that are externally required of us. And so some of the things that won't be talked about this afternoon or tonight, you'll actually see how the state in our LCAP holds us accountable to reporting on those goals and continuing to improve in areas that are not discussed here. That's true also for the California dashboard. So we have a responsibility in data that is reported publicly and that in many ways is judgment of our school system beyond the board's goals. You have identified through root cause analysis, through your work with staff, the most important areas of focus so that all students achieve. And we are held accountable through a number of other mechanisms that are public and external facing. So today, as we dig in, we're going to be talking about board goals, which represent the vision for the community, and board guardrails, and revisiting, not for the first time of recent, but really getting into guardrails in a way that we have not experienced as a whole team recently, but that we are prepared to do tonight. And that is the values of the community and the way that you made statements strongly about what you believe are the values of our community. We're also going to use a protocol. So the reason that we're in different spaces in this room is so that we can engage in that protocol and engage in discussion with all of you to do really good listening as staff. We'll take some notes, we'll compile those notes so that we can share them as a compilation with all of our board members and staff. And the focus of this afternoon is about our interpretation of goals and guardrails. So when we talk about our interim goals to reaching the board goals, that is an interpretation of what you have set out for us. When you hear us talk about guardrails that you have set, what the superintendent can't do, we have selected some very specific areas to monitor the values through the work of staff. And we're going to listen for your interpretation of what that looks like when we share the interim guardrails. So we'll go in two parts. Dr. Madrigal and Brian are going to engage you in a conversation about the goals, the student outcome goals. I'll jump in and share about our interim guardrails, pass it back to Brian for taking you through the protocol. And so together as a team and the rest of the senior team who is here to support are going to take you through those two parts. I left a reference tool at your place because I think it will be helpful to go back to when we think about goals and guardrails. Actually, the guidance that we're anchored in is the board self-assessment. So we may refer to that. The first page, so you have 2 pages of a 6-part self-assessment. You have the first page represents vision and goals, and looking all the way to the right that we're aiming towards mastering student outcomes focus. So we may refer to that when we talk about goals. And then the second page that you have is around values and guardrails. So if you wonder where the language comes from, that's a good reference back. Just to share on the timeline, the implementation timeline, you actually will be participating in your self-assessment likely in July. So we want to just keep going back to that document as a means of learning and revisiting the expectations for points, because we know that ultimately you're interested in getting a lot more than 0 points in the future. So we aim to move from the left to the right as you enhance your effective governance practices, and we support you in the way that that is taking place. So pleased this afternoon to get started. With that in mind, Dr. Madrigal, you are going to take us into the interim goals.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be in this learning space with you again. And as Dr. Baker shared, we have spent a lot of time really giving an update on board goals, and so we're at a point where we want to give a refresher on what are interim goals. And just a reminder, interim goals are in support of our board goals. They're developed in support of them so that we're able to look at different times of the year when data is available to inform us on how close are we getting to reaching those board goals. And so it's important for us to make sure that our interim goals are smart, that data is available to be able to report out more than one time throughout the year. And if we're doing all those things, it should tell us or tell the board that we are getting closer to accomplishing the board goals. So the interim goals that I'm going to go over today, what I'm going to do is give you a high-level summary of what the interim goals are for each board goal. And I'm specifically going to call out something that is new in the interim goals. So we'll begin with the first board goal, specifically board goal 1, interim goal. The interim goal that
Dr. Montevigo, I'm
Yes.
going to just pause
Yeah.
and make sure everybody has the right handout so that
Sure.
they can follow along. So you're using the handout that says Goals and Guardrails adopted in November 2023. It's stapled. Yeah. Second page. Thank you for pausing.
Oh, absolutely. So I am actually going to give you some guidance on how to look at the interim goals from more of a technical lens. What we did differently was we labeled each interim goal as, for example, we have interim goal 1A, 1B, and 1C. You'll see a pattern similar to, as I mentioned, to the first goal in each of the board goals. So I may make reference to 1A, and then I will call out specific things that may be different or new. And if I don't make reference to a specific interim goal, that is because there was no change to that interim goal. So just to begin, something that is similar for goal 1 as it pertains to interim goals, the data source remains the same, meaning we are still going to be looking at our iReady data. We're still going to look at foundational reading skills assessment data. What is different is that for 1B, we are now pulling in spring fluency assessments for specifically grade 3. So that is what is different. So that is a new interim goal. I'll pause there if there are any questions on the new, what is new in our interim goal.
As you use the term spring fluency assessment, can you give us a little bit more
Sure.
context?
So our students do take a fluency test in our system, but what we're specifically calling out is grade 3 because we know that it is very important for our students to not only decode and comprehend, but I think of fluency as it's like the bridge between both of them. We want to make sure that students are able to read with expression, with the ability to read at a pace that is appropriate for that age or that grade level, and at the same time that they're comprehending what they're reading. And that is what the fluency assessment test, that expression, the flow of how they're reading. Again, our students have taken a fluency test specifically like in first grade, first grade, but what we're really calling out is that third graders also need to make sure that in terms of fluency, they're reading at the appropriate level for fluency. So that is new for our third graders.
Can I ask why we're leaving the DI students out?
We are not leaving them out. Currently, research is working on developing a progress monitoring calendar that is going to ensure that we are recognizing that they take assessments not only in Spanish, but also in English. And then we also have one school that is a 50-50 model. So there's more work that we're doing there. So it's also important that when we're collecting data that we're specific about the data is, for example, all English assessments, and this data is now calling out all the Spanish assessments. So progress monitoring happens in both languages in our dual immersion programs. So it's only highlighted just to call out that it doesn't include the Spanish assessment yet.
Okay, is it likely that they'll have a Spanish fluency Yes. test for the DI
Yes,
students?
currently we're working on that with our curriculum leads. More to come in the fall. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move us to Board Goal 2, or interim goals for Board Goal 2. The only difference here is that, again, we are calling now our fluency assessment specifically for 4th and 5th graders, and these are our not met students on SBAC the previous year. So it's in, again, support of that board goal, which is our not met students. We're pulling in a fluency assessment for them. And we're also going to be pulling in quarterly ELA exams, which is a change in our system. Next year, we will be moving to a progress monitoring calendar that is looking at data quarterly. So that is being called out in 2C. For our third board goal,
Can we pause
Yes.
just for a moment? A lot of work has gone into the preparation for the assessments that you just mentioned. I think it would be good just to pause for a moment, and it doesn't have to be you, Dr. Madrigal, if Mr. Samuels or Mr. Moskowitz want to talk about the significance of that kind of assessment and why it's important in the system. I think that would be great.
I can get us started, and then I know Mr. Samuels, Dr. Lund, probably others as well. So we have always had unit assessments that are district created for both language arts and math. When we've actually done, as the research team has done analysis of and correlation between our unit assessments and our SBAC, for example, you all saw in a previous progress monitoring report session the high level of correlation between our district math exams and our students' performance on SBAC. So we've had that for quite a while, but students take their unit exams at very different times throughout the year. Kindergarten, first grade, all the way up through 12th, they happen at very different times. And so what happens is, as a system, it's been really difficult for us to be able to, for a principal at a school site, to be able to take a moment in time and do deep analysis with all teachers at their school, because the assessments have been coming in at very different times. So the shift that we're making for this next year with feedback from conversation with teacher council, conversation with principals, is that we're shifting to those unit exams. We're having these new quarterly exams that will happen at the end of each quarter. And that will give the entire system, frankly, from senior team and district leaders to principals to teachers at the classroom level with students, to pause over a couple of weeks and really go deeply into those assessment results, have conversations, teachers with one another, teachers with students, and then create action plans about what will be different for that following quarter. So not a lot of change in the way that we actually, look at, assess students, look at data, act on it. But by having these quarterly exams across our system, it creates a progress monitoring that is consistent and allows, as I said, allows principals to have those conversations with teachers in a consistent time, and will allow all of us, frankly, in this room to have conversations in a really intentional way as well. I don't know if there's anything anyone would add.
And to confirm, this assessment is not a new form of standardized testing that we're adding to the district. These are systems that we've already had in place that we're just using now at a standardized time so that we can capture the data, correct?
Yeah, so when we think about like standardized assessments, we usually think about summative assessments that happen at the end of the year. These are more formative and interim. So there are opportunities for, after a teacher has taught a certain amount of content, to assess, did students learn that content? If they did, great. And if they didn't, what might we do in the moment to provide intervention and reteaching and support so that they will continue to stay on progress towards those summative assessments? So we think of these quarterly exams in the formative interim stage versus summative that usually happen at the end of a semester or at the end of the year.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I know that has been often a conversation that I've heard from my meetings with teachers about long hours being spent on testing, and unfortunately, I mean, there was a previous regime where we were teaching students how to take tests in contrast to mastering content. And so I know that it sounds as though obviously we're taking a stark move away from them. So that's great.
So I'll move us on to our board goal 3 interim goal. Interim goal 3C is what is new. And what is new is similar to what we just discussed, moving into this quarterly system, but specifically we will be looking at quarterly math exams. And then moving on to the 4th goal, there's actually 2 changes to our interim goals, 4A and 4B. I'll begin with 4A. 4A, we are going to be looking at our 9th through 12th grade Black African American students to ensure that they have a C or better in English language arts in the A through G courses. A wondering might be, well, why English language arts? Well, English language arts is the course that is required the 4 years. So it's really critical that we ensure that our kids are on track and that we catch it as soon as it occurs so that we can offer support and also an opportunity to recover that course, because that will keep them, that will make them off track. And it is really difficult to make up a year's worth when it's required for 4 years. So we were very intentional in making sure that we called out the English language arts. 4B is specific to also A through G, but we're now looking at, if you recall, when we've provided an update on the board goals, we've talked about 9th grade, we look at English and math in terms of being off track, on track, A through G, and then we'll provide also like that overall at 12th grade, like where are our kiddos. But what is different about this interim goal is that we have looked at data, and historically 11th grade is the grade where we see that more kids are off track, and we want to make sure that when they're off track, 11th grade, we still have an opportunity to offer, again, that support and that opportunity to recover. And instead of looking at just 12th grade is already too late. So those are the 2 changes that we made to those interim goals. I will pause here before we transition to Mr. Moskowitz.
Okay, we'll have some opportunity. If you have a question, please ask.
I'm sorry. Were you going to say that you'll have an opportunities to ask questions?
Well, we're going to move into the protocol, which will increase some conversation. And we'll have. But if you have a question about one of the interim goals in 3 or 4, please ask.
Well, I'm thinking about the spirit of our board goals. What was that, 18 months ago now? Or, yeah, it was a while ago. And I think that we came up with goal number 3 because we saw mathematics as being the largest hurdle for our African-American students when it came through A through G readiness, or compliance, while, my thoughts are a little discombobulated here, so give me a second. I guess my question is more centered around, I understand that we have goal 3 that is going to be focused towards mathematics, but we also know that that same compliance issue is probably the biggest hurdle. So would there be some weird mesh of the 2 in 4? Shouldn't there be? Or shouldn't there be some conversation about mathematics when it came to A through G compliance? So just a thought.
I think for the purpose of specifically goal 4, although we're calling out, and I just want to make sure that I capture, your question and I'm answering it correctly, but for goal 4, we're calling out ELA as an example because it is that core subject that is required the 4 years. That's not to say that we're not also looking at on track for the other core subjects, because the students are required to complete a set of courses by the time they are in 12th grade to be A through G, or have that A through G completion. But we know how critical it is for ELA because of the 4-year requirement.
I guess even as I'm asking the question, I'm almost answering it in my head. As I understand that 4 years of English completion is one of the triggers to making sure that you're eligible but I think it was the mathematics that we saw was often the biggest hurdle. But with already being listed as a goal, I think technically we're kind of checking. So I understand both sides of it, but yeah, I needed to talk it through. Thank you.
And I think as you ask the question, it is a reminder that Goal 3 in some ways is a bit of a subset of Goal 4. Goal 4 is the broader A through G. One of the components of A through G is mathematics. Goal 3 is going deep into that, not because math is necessarily the greatest hurdle, though it could be, but it's also, we want to provide opportunities for those higher level mathematics courses in high school that open up an entire field of STEM and other possibilities for students. So it may be a hurdle for some students, and it also is an access to other opportunities in college that by passing algebra by ninth grade opens up those higher level mathematics courses to them. Okay, so we're going to spend a little time. We'll spend about the next 10 or 15 minutes or so really looking at the protocol. So I'm going to ask you to have a couple of documents out. You'll keep out the one with the goals and interim goals that we were just looking at. And you'll notice that we have color coordination. So blue meets blue. So on the protocol, we're going to be working in the blue boxes. The first page of the protocol up at the top says, interim goals, vision. If we, staff, accomplish the interim goals, are we likely to accomplish each board goal? So that's kind of a broad question that we'll want to discuss. But if you turn the page, I'm actually going to ask you to start on the back side with the blue as well. And the back side on the blue at the top says, are there any ambiguities or areas that require greater clarity as it relates to the interim goals? So you're going to have a conversation. We're going to kind of do it by corners here, conversations by corners. And what we'd like you to do is you're going to go through each of the interim goals, read them to yourself. And then on this notes page, you can take notes for yourself, and we would encourage everybody to do so. But we're also going to have a couple of individuals, myself, Dr. Baker, Dr. Madrigal, are going to be taking the notes from the board members that we will then be able to kind of collect up later to see what were some of the overall trends. And then, of course, senior team is going to weigh in as well. And these folks over here, maybe we'll let Dr. On be the one taking notes for senior team over there. One of you can figure that out. So what we'd like you to do, we're going to start you on this box, on this page here. You're going to go through each of the 4 board goals, paying close attention to the interim goals. And you're not asking yourself, are these the goals that the superintendent should adopt, the interim goals that the superintendent and staff should adopt, because that is not the board's role. But what we want to know is, are there any ambiguities or areas that need more clarity for you as the board to understand what we're up to as it relates to those interim goals? Okay, so go through each of them. Staff will take notes for board goals 1, 2, 3, and 4 as we look at those interims. And then towards the end of that, you can go back to the front page and then have a conversation. If we accomplish the interim goals, are we likely to accomplish the board goals? Okay, right now, we'll give it about 10 minutes because we do want to get onto our guardrails too, but we'll give it about 10 minutes and see where we're at. We good? All right. And this will be off mic, so we do not need to, so Ms. Lopez, Mr. Miller with Dr. Baker, Mr. Otto, perfect. We'll be heading towards goal 3, depending on where you're at, just from a time perspective. So just a little time. Thank you. One more minute on these interim goals. All right, I'm going to ask for the purpose of time. Hopefully I'm not cutting short too much the conversation. And again, for the purposes of time, rather than having whole group conversation, because we're going to collect up these notes and we'll be able to then come together and hear, and we'll see how much time is left at the end before, but we want to make sure that we transition to the guardrails and interim guardrails, because those are a little bit new. We haven't spent as much time looking at those. So I will ask you'll turn to the red guardrails and interim guardrails, and I will hand it back to Dr. Baker to lead this part.
Yeah, thank you. We were over here having an amazing discussion. Yes. So I'm going to kick off this section and starting with the self-assessment tool. So you have this in front of you. This is the from not student outcome focus to 15 points for mastering student outcome focus. And just the center paragraph, I'm just going to read it quickly because it reminds us about the context of interim guardrails. So all of the interim guardrails, this is what we're striving for, are predictive of their respective guardrails and are influenceable by the superintendent and the team. Predictive suggests that there's some evidence of a correlation between the interim guardrail and the guardrail. Influenceable suggests that the superintendent and through them, the staff or team, has authority over roughly 80% of whatever the interim guardrail is measuring. So as we thought about interim guardrails, we have done a lot of listening in this boardroom and a lot of listening in one-on-one sessions. I have done a lot of listening in one-on-one sessions and drawing from a number of really important resources. As you know, this is year 2 of our local control accountability plan. Last year, we spent a lot of time in the boardroom describing and illustrating the connection between board goals, Vision 2035, and the strategic plan. And so that is a place where community value was codified in your Vision 2035 document, and that we took to a strategic plan to design how we would achieve Vision 2035. And so the guardrails that I'm going to share with you for a conversation reflect that. Each of these interim guardrails reflects an aspect of work that in some way is reflected in our plans and has been reflected in the conversations in the boardroom. In some ways, they represent a proxy or a part of a way to look at the work of staff. So this is staff work that brings forward a way to demonstrate on an ongoing basis how we are living out the values that are in your guardrails. So as a reminder, and this is always funny to go back to, the guardrails are written as not statements. And so the first guardrail is a superintendent may not allow resources to be allocated without evidence of their equitable distribution aligned with the Excellence and Equity Board policy. So it was our work to think about how do we take what we have heard, your interpretation of that in the boardroom and in our other documents, and think about elements that would represent that. So in Guardrail 1, that is about equitable resourcing, we tested out a lot of ideas in ways that we could interpret what you have said is the guardrail. And we've established 2 that we think are aligned. So the question today for you will be, do you think that our interim guardrails represent the way that you interpret the guardrails that you set? So when you think about the superintendent may not allow resources to be allocated without evidence, do these 2 areas represent that in a way that you imagine will give you enough detail to know that we are living out the values of the community that you have set in those guardrails? So starting with equitable resourcing, 1A, we bring to you an important aspect of our work that is taking from the existing 12 schools that have Sankofa parent villages to a goal of having 45 schools that will have Sankofa parent villages. That is a place where resources are put into those Sankofa parent village communities. It also aligns with this idea of the excellence and equity policy that has a focus on marginalized students, in particular our Black students. And so as a means of assessing, are we living out those values? That is the one of the areas that we would like to use as an interim. The second is specifically around our English learners. This is in some ways a process goal, but speaks to an expectation of the progress that our students make and all of the resources, the budget, and the aspects of compliance that are monitored in ensuring that our English learners have all that they need to be successful. And that is that by June 2028, 100% of English learner students will have all required evaluation, necessary intervention plan recommendations, documentation and program updates completed by the regular deadlines established for the current school year. And there's some detail and wording and acronyms that I will take back that need to be spelled out about the expectation for how we resource relative to our English learners. One of the challenges in setting interim guardrails is that there are so many ways that we could bring forth. These seem to be strong proxies for the statement about the intent of your guardrails. In the second, you'll see a selection. So the second guardrail is around inclusive decision-making. The superintendent may not allow major district-wide initiatives to go forth without engaging students of color and their families, following stakeholder engagement principles that are utilizing current adopted best practices. In our strategic plan, the last couple of years, one of the strategies has been about deep learning in work with our parents and our community. As part of that, Dr. Salazar and her team have established a community engagement framework that draws upon many ways to engage families. And so we believe that an interim measure for inclusive decision-making is in the modes of engagement and assessing in those modes of engagement. How many focus groups were held? What was the data from those focus groups? The idea of town halls has come up as a board opportunity, but also for staff, surveys and others, that we would create a baseline for that, and then we would work to increase through an annual target relative to that baseline. So that, we believe, serves as a strong proxy for what you have set as the guardrail for the superintendent. And then in the area of educational and racial equity, which is the superintendent may not, the guardrail is, the superintendent may not allow implementation or adoption of any classroom curricula or programming that does not prioritize educational and racial equity. As you set that as a guardrail for me and for our team, the two areas that we see as focus interim goals that will allow us to elevate progress as proxies for that guardrail are establishing by June 2028 gaps between the percent of students of color and all other students in grades 9 through 12 who are enrolled in a dual enrollment course will decline to 0% or maintain equitable enrollment from the baseline. And the data isn't there, but we will have a baseline when this comes back to you. And then maintaining the importance of measuring students' sense of belonging as a proxy that tells us a lot about the educational experience of our students of color would be to maintain at least an 80% favorable response and sense of belonging as measured by the pulse survey and reduce any gaps between students of color and all other students. So these are the ways that we have deeply considered what you have said are the guardrails for us to abide by and to operate within, and areas that also allow us to elevate focus areas of yours that may not be established in the student outcome focus goals, but that would allow us to bring regular progress around the guardrails that you have set. So back to the question, and then I'll pass to Brian. So the question is, when you see the interim guardrails, our interpretation of your guardrails, do the interim guardrails reflect the board's interpretation of the guardrails?
Thank you, Dr. Baker. So just kind of, I want to put a pin on that. So the board's role through our SOFG approach is not to approve or not approve the interim guardrails. The question for you and Dr. Benitez as well, is that question there. Do the interim guardrails, as we've listed them, do they reflect your understanding, your interpretation of the broad guardrails themselves? Do the interim guardrails reflect your understanding of what you intended when you created the guardrails themselves? So you're not saying, I'd like 1A, I like 1B, I'm going to approve those. That's not the question. Do the interim guardrails reflect your understanding of your intention behind the guardrails when you adopted them? And I'm actually going to ask us we're going to spend most of our time on that first question. The second page there really asks for any suggestions. Because we do want to hear your suggestions as it relates to the interim guardrails 1, 2, and 3. But really the question is, let's spend some time. We'll spend about 8 or 10 minutes on that first page. When you see our interpretation of the interim guardrails, or of the guardrails, do the interim guardrails reflect the board's interpretation? So it's 4:30. We'll see if we can get about 10 minutes of conversation around the interim guardrails, and then we'll come back whole group. Dr. Madrigal, Dr. Baker, and then I'm gonna do the same here. If we, within each kind of corner, if we can have each board member or maybe each of you or one, if you could share one, as it relates to the guardrails in particular, I think the goals we'd seen those more recently. But as it relates to the guardrails, is there something that really has stuck with you in the guardrails, either one that really resonates with you, it could be a question that you have, just something you can share publicly with the group, something as you looked through the interim guardrails in alignment with the guardrails themselves. What's something that's really resonating with you, a place that you saw strong connection, or something that you just feel strongly about? And we'll give you about 60 seconds to figure out what that's going to be that you're going to share. And then we'll go ahead and go around and have each group share. All right, so let's just do it. We'll do a quick whip around. Each board member just have a quick moment to share, as it relates to the interim guardrails, something that resonated with you. And President Craighead?
Yes. For me, it was for guardrail number 2, so there's only one interim, and that's 2A, and that is around engagement activities, engaging the community, and for me, that's foundational to the work that we do, so that one stands out.
Mr. Miller.
Well, first, I'm going to applaud you to holding us accountable about not really being heavy critiques on the interim guardrails, but more of making sure that they're in alignment to what our initial principles were. And to that, I looked at guardrail number 3 in particular, and I just was very or let me take a step back. I truly believe that the best gauge of the curriculum and programming being prioritized with racial equity can really be captured through the poll surveys. And I think that's going to be the best tool to help us confirm that we're meeting that expectation that we set as a board. And so I'm just very appreciative that we already kind of had that in place, but now we have something that can truly hold us accountable to it.
If you were sitting down here with us, you would have heard almost the same conversation. So that's good. It's good there's alignment. Ms. Lopez.
So I think this is a good start. What stood out for me is that we just can't, hopefully not just look at guardrail 1, 2, and 3 and say, okay, on guardrail 1 we have 1A and 1B, and so long as we do both of these, we've secured the equitable resourcing for the district. So there's many other things, and I think that these guardrails, these are just examples, but it's just not so long as we meet these examples, we've met, we've made sure that we've met the guidelines and the guardrails. So there's just a lot more that should be in all of these.
Yeah, and we also had that conversation that we can't, we could, if we listed, well, one of the things we said is if we listed all the things that show equitable resourcing, it would actually probably be the LCAP, because the LCAP really is the plan, the 160-page plan that does show all of the resourcing. So, but yeah, great. Again, conversation we had over here, so more alignment. Mr. Otto, would you like to bring us home? If we can get you on the microphone, Mr. Otto.
I'm done. We made a decision that the people that had been thinking about this long and hard, as opposed to the people that had been elected, should talk about it. So we're going to let you talk about it.
I've been delegated to speak. Thank you. We had a good conversation about how while the goals reflect our student outcomes, the guardrails really represent the value of the community and the expectation that there will be accountability for the superintendent, the position, not the person.
Thank you very much. Dr. Baker, would you like to close us out and
Thank
tell us about
you.
next steps?
First of all, thank you for really good work. Our team appreciates the opportunity to engage with you informally and to get into a really good discussion, so appreciate that. We will do some bringing your thoughts all together, which sounds like there was a lot of alignment across our groups in preparation for the June 18th meeting. So the June 18th meeting will include the board goals and guardrails with annual targets for the board goals for each year leading up to 2028, and that will be requested for adoption. You will also have the monitoring calendar that is through 2028 coming to you that reflects all of the monitoring. And then we will do our last refinement, including our targets for our interims. That's for information, as Brian shared, it's not for a vote, but it is for information so that you have an entire package to start the new fiscal year with in July. We're also going to find time, and we have, I'll come back to you with a date to each of you. We think that it would be good to go through some of the metrics again, one-on-one or in 2x2s with the board, and so we've got some calendar dates that I will follow up on with you where you can ask personal questions or individual questions. You can know more a little bit about the systems behind the scenes related to the student data, and so we look forward to that as well. So again, thank you for really good work this afternoon. Appreciate it. Turning back to you, President Craighead.
Thank you. Well, in light of the fact that we need to be starting another meeting in 10 minutes, we'll take a break and we will reconvene at 5 o'clock. Thank you, everyone, for sticking to a tight time schedule, and Mr. Moskovitz for your dual function here with yes. So thank you, everyone. We'll reconvene at 5.